Hello all. In the last session, we discussed about the functionalities of each layer in the ISO OSI reference model. In this session, we are going to discuss some points which are relevant to these models and layers. We have seen that at the sender side, the data is given from the upper layer to the lower layer, whereas at the receiver side, the data is delivered from lower layer to the upper layer. So we can conclude that there is a communication between these layers, amongst these layers. This is called as interoperability between these layers. One more point is, we say that the upper layers receive the services from the lower layers, whereas lower layers provide the services to the upper layers. Another point is encapsulation. Let us see what this is. We have two machines. We will call one as sender and another as receiver. And we will take an example of email application. So sender is writing an email and the contents of that email are nothing but D7, which is data at the 7th layer, which is application layer. What application layer does is it attaches its own header to the data and we call this encapsulated data. Now you can observe in the diagram at each layer it is adding some header to it and it is represented by the letter H. When the data is ready at the application layer, it is given to the lower layer. At the lower layer, you can observe that the whole of this, that original data as well as header of the application layer is treated as the payload, that is actual data. And to that encapsulated data, a header which is corresponding to presentation layer is attached. The process continues up to data link layer. At data link layer, it not only adds header, but it also adds trailer. This is an exception. So this is the concept of encapsulation, that attaching a header which is corresponding to that layer to the data which is received from the upper layer. The opposite process is carried out at the receiver. What happens is the received data is delivered to the upper layer by removing its own header. Similarly, at the data link layer, header as well as trailer will be removed and the data is given to the network layer. At the network layer, it will remove H3 and the remaining data will be given to the transport layer. This is called as decapsulation. I hope the idea is clear. Let me summarize. At the sender, we have encapsulated data, that is the actual data to the actual data. The protocol layer attaches its own header and then that encapsulated data is given to the lower layer. There is an exception of data link layer. It attaches header, but along with it, it will attach the trailer also. At the receiver side, there is decapsulation, which is removing these headers corresponding to those layers and then delivering the data to the upper layer. Now, what are the contents of these headers? These headers contain the information related to that particular layer. It might be related to the protocols that are being used. The header formats of each layer we are going to study in detail when we study the protocols. Let us proceed. The next point is peer-to-peer process. In this diagram, you can observe that up to the network layer, the data reaches at every hop. And from the transport layer, it directly communicates with corresponding layer of the final destination. You can observe here that there are intermediate nodes as well, because in the routing process, suppose the destination is far away, there are intermediate routers which need to be visited by the data packet, and then those routers will then forward it to the next router. So this peer-to-peer process indicates that the data packet which is sent by the, in this case, device A, it will reach the intermediate router. The data packet will be opened at the physical layer. It will be delivered to the data link layer of the router. At the network layer, there will be some changes in the header of the data packet, and then it will again be sent through the physical layer of the same router to the next hop. Please understand, this peer-to-peer process means when the protocol directly talks to the counterpart of the protocol at the receiver. The data packet does not reach transport, session, presentation, and application layer of the intermediate routers. That data packet will reach those layers at the receiver only, and that is why it is called as peer-to-peer process. Whereas up to network layer, the data packet will reach to the network layer of each and every intermediate router. This is concept of peer-to-peer process. Now the next concept is roles of switches and routers in LANs. This we need to understand the operation of a LAN. In this diagram, you can observe that there is a LAN which comprises of various PCs. Some of these PCs are connected to switch 1, some of the PCs are connected to switch 2, and these two switches are connected to the router. This router is then finally connected to the router of outside LAN. We may consider this LAN as our PICT campus LAN. There are various PCs situated in various labs. In each lab, we have a different switch to which these PCs are connected, and these switches are then connected to the PICT router. If a person sitting on this PC wants to send the data which is outside the LAN, PICT LAN, then that data has to be routed through this router only. So the concept that we need to understand here is switches operate inside the LAN, router is a boundary of a LAN, and router is the mediator between outside world, outside internet, and the internal workstations that we have. I hope the idea is clear in this case. So we have before router network and after router network. This is called as before router network because the data has to cross this router if it needs to communicate with the outside world. And this is called as outside or after the router. Here, please understand, switches operate inside the LAN. I'm repeating this part. Switches operate inside the LAN and router operates at the boundary. So, router has LAN side as well as WAN side. We have discussed about LAN and WAN. So, we should be knowing what a LAN and a WAN is. I hope the idea is clear. Now we have come to an end of this session. Thank you.